my goodness, what can be said about someone who has a career but then transitioned into doing some great things business-wise. And we are here with Ms. Salima Cartwright. How are you doing this fine?
Fine. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thanks a lot for your good humor, your good patience, and you had one of your adoring public, you know, before we got rolling, calling in and everything. So for our viewers, I think what will help is a point of reference regarding where you're from and what you were previously doing, and then what was that moment for you to pivot into looking at other opportunities for, let's say, your business and professional and related growth.
Okay, okay. I'm going to try to make this long story short. It's a really long story, but I'll make it as short as possible. Yeah, so 21 years ago, well, prior to that, I was always having issues with my hair. I was always having issues, and it was always my fault. Dry hair problems, color, treated hair, relaxers, all types of problems. Traction, alopecia, all type of stuff from braids and just damage. So I was always trying to, figure out what to do with my hair. I wanted to get my hair healthy, but I couldn't. It was always my fault. I was always doing something to damage my hair. So I ended up going to cosmetology school in the early 90s, and I just learned about better hair care practices and things like that. I started practicing as a cosmetologist. And then while I was doing my clients' hair, I was just noticing that they were still experiencing breakage. So I would just notice when I would balance the moisture and protein levels in the hair, I noticed that the hair would start to flourish. So that's when the seed was planted for our product line, Hydratherma Naturals. I was doing hair, I was balancing the moisture and protein levels in the hair. When I was using too much protein, the hair would start breaking. When I was using too much moisture, the hair would start breaking. So when I started balancing things out, then the hair would start to flourish. So that's when the seed was really planted for Hydratherma Naturals products. I worked as a cosmetologist for a while, and then I got out of it for a while, worked as a hospice nurse for about 10 years, but I went back to my first love, which is hair. And that's when we actually started the Hydratherma Naturals line, and this line is designed to balance the moisture and the protein levels in the hair. So that's why we created the line, and then from the line came the book.
Wow. Yeah. So before we go any further, that's an interesting backstory. So you were already doing work within cosmetology, and for lack of a better term, you gave a little bit of a break in order to go into nursing, which it's still overlap because you're still looking at areas of health and wellness, things along those lines.
Exactly.
People don't always think hair, health. Well, yeah, based on what you described, yes, there are some real ties to it.
Yes.
And then when you came back, it's almost like you came back like in a stronger form, in a stronger version, like based on what you acquired previously, based on what you saw as a nurse. Now it's almost like you're bringing even better best practices with health and wellness, best practices in regards to some of the things you mentioned in regards to things that we don't always think about with hair, like you said, pH balance and moisture, all these other moving parts.
Right.
Go a little bit further before we pivot and talk a little bit more about the book. Go a little bit further in detail about the products, because people like product line, what makes this different, or what makes this something that people really need to pay attention to?
Okay, well, what makes the product line a lot different than other product lines on the market is that our goal and focus is to balance the moisture and protein levels in the hair, which will which will help you to retain length, help to encourage growth. So all of our products here are designed to do that. Like we have our moisture-based products, which will infuse the hair with moisture, and then we have our protein-based products, which will infuse the hair with protein, which will give the hair a nice balance of moisture and protein. If you have too much protein, the hair will get hard and it'll start popping off. If it has too much moisture, it'll be too soft. People can't over-moisturize their hair. So if you have a nice balance, then the hair will have great elasticity. You can have length retention. It's not going to be popping off just as fast as it's growing out. So that's the goal of our line. We've helped thousands and thousands of women get their hair back in shape. We've been doing this for 11 years, going on 12 years.
And I think that's great that you're able to detail that, because again, it's one of those things where you don't think about some of these other moving parts. Like, I remember growing up, it was like putting on some Ultra Sheen and good luck, and that was about it. And some people out there might be still doing that. Not to knock anybody, but you do. But think about, you do what you know. Yeah. And again, it comes back to what I said before, your experience previously as a cosmetologist, then going in a little bit deeper into health, and so now you're bringing all these different things, and you make some really, good points. Let me ask you this, and I know you stressed some of the things for women. Are there things in regards to balance and things along those lines that men can also pay attention to?
Yes, absolutely. Like our products can be used on men and women. A lot of the men, they're like, oh, can I use this for my hair? Or their wives will buy it, and then their wives will go back and try to get their moisturizer, and then it's all gone because their husband's been using it. So yes, definitely, men can use the products. It's the same. I mean, it's the same.
And
as long as you have working hair follicles, then our products will help you get your hair.
And I'm glad you're stressing that, because I know back in the day, you'd see mama and them and auntie and cousins twice removed and whatever, and you're sitting here like, that's just their stuff. But then, as you get older, like you're saying, there's so many other different moving parts with health, and sometimes we as men, we don't think about it. Like, we don't think about it.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
now it's good to say that, hey, look, men, we have to pay better attention to some of those same type of dynamics.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
So now here you are with the previous experience, the experience in health, coming back around being stronger, and you've got a product lineup that is focusing on striving to have that balance, health, and growth. And I think that's a great launching point for transitioning to the next hat you're wearing as a published author. Walk through for our viewers, in addition to showcasing what people need to keep on their radar.
Yes.
Walk us through the progression of, here you are, you've got a solid, business, you're doing great things, you're helping a lot of people, which is part of what you're trying to do in business. How did you transition from that to putting out and getting your book, which really, it's not, quote, the traditional book, it's really more of a resource and reference base.
It is. And it's so funny because I've been working on this book for about, on and off for like 10 years. Like, it's crazy. Like, I kind of just did it as like a hobby at first. I was like, oh, let me just jot down some tips, to help people just get their hair back in shape. So it's kind of like, started off as being like a pamphlet. And then while I was working as a nurse, I would be like just, if I had some free time, I would just be jotting down some tips and things like that. And then it just got bigger and bigger, and I'm like, hey, I can make, I can really help a lot of people if I just made like a reference book about this. And that's how I kind of got started. It's been like a long process, but I haven't been working on it like every day. But it was like something I work on, then I would put it aside for maybe a year or two, and then I'll hey, let me go back to my book, and I'll work on it. And I really got like the last year or so, that's when I really was like, I need to really get this done. So that's when I really put everything into it, and I was like, I need to do it, and that's when I really actually did it.
So in other words, it wasn't like you think about people who write, like I've had published authors in here before, and I happen to be one too, and everybody's writing process is different, so it's not always the traditional, let me lock myself in a room and have a beverage and listen to the birds chirping and all that. Everybody's process is different, and yours really, almost like your products, is really organic. It's like, oh, let me just write this down as a point of reference. Let me just notch this down.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden, after doing, it's like, wait a minute, I've got something here.
Yeah.
So I think that's another thing to stress, like with anybody who is writing or has written or what have you, everybody's process is different. You don't have to quote, I have to get it done in a certain amount of time. Get it done when you get it done.
Yeah.
And more important, what you're putting in there, you've got something to say. Like for people that might have had questions about, I always wondered about this hairstyle or this product or this technique or whatever, what things do I need to pay attention to? This is, like you said, years in the making.
Yeah, it was very organic. It wasn't like I just was like, oh, let me just sit down and do this. It was just kind of like, do a little bit here, a couple tips here, a couple tips there, and next thing you know, I had a book. So that's basically how it happened.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the cover again. 300, you've almost got like a tip a day.
Yeah, almost.
Like
yeah.
seriously. Or at least
Yeah.
like there's usually 30 days of the month. So you got people take care of 10 days, 10 months. I think the only times you're probably off are like during like June and December.
You're right.
So, but that's great. I mean, it's great because number one, just looking at that number, it seems like anybody that's looking for some type of constructive answer or approach, you can basically find it there.
Yes, absolutely. Like when I wrote this book, I kind of took some some of my nursing skills, and I made it's called APIE, right? A stands for assessment. So when you're a nurse, you assess things. So I did that. I put that in the book. Assess what's going on with your hair.